get into question 3, and we'll have a little bit more time to dive deeper. This is a long one. I like to warn folks, so bear with me as I set the stage a little bit. But Portland, along with other cities across the nation, is experiencing a rise in houselessness driven by the lack of affordable housing. The ongoing COVID pandemic has economically wrecked entire communities, devastated households, and significant and continued lack of access to mental health services, including healthcare-centered substance use disorder treatment. Despite credible research, and again, I want to say credible research, that shows police sweeps of houseless encampments don't solve houselessness and fail to lead in effective housing solutions, the city continues to support this harmful practice. Particularly, I would say our current council supports this harmful practice. My question to you is, how will you prevent the displacement of houseless communities and elevate real solutions that result in vulnerable Portlanders finding and maintaining housing? I have a part 2, but let's dive into this one. Yeah, how would you prevent this displacement?
Yeah, let's start with the really big picture. I oppose the criminalization of poverty. I oppose the brutalization of houseless people. And as someone with a graduate degree in human rights, housing is a human right. And so I think it's important to start with those first principles. I also think that there's a lot of consensus in the community around the end goals. Nobody wants to have folks living on the street, unsheltered, right? We always want to have people in housing. There's a lot of disagreement on how to get there and also who's to blame. But in terms of the end goal, I think that's a near consensus position citywide. And so my Housing for All plan, which includes housing affordability and addressing unsheltered homelessness, it relates to first prevention. So I'm a day one signer of the Renters Bill of Rights. I've been a renter my entire adult life, and I've had some pretty, I guess the word would be gnarly housing situations. I've been the 5th roommate in a 4-bedroom apartment. I've had to decide what bills to pay and what can wait, you know? And so I think we need to be sure that we're protecting renters against a lot of the different types of evictions. So one example in that Bill of Rights is the idea that during an extreme weather event, you can't be evicted for an incomplete rent payment. You're $100 short on your rent payment and it's 115 degrees outside. In East Portland, it might be hotter, also in North Portland, in terms of surface temperature, but you can't be evicted during that time. Gives you a little extra time during that extreme weather emergency to get the rest of the rent together. So things like that. And for the over 80% of the evictions in Oregon are due to late or incomplete rent. And so you're addressing the vast majority of the problem with that type of intervention. And you're also ensuring that it's just easier and cheaper to help someone stay in a home versus help them get back into shelter after they're already houseless. So that's the first thing. And we are in an affordability crisis, so we also need to address that in terms of long-term solutions and make it cheaper and easier to live here. The second thing is sheltering. So we need a range of shelters. We have a lot of shelter, but it's not enough. And we need to build more and expand not only the overall volume of beds, but the different types, different services offered, and different focuses of each group, whether this allows families to stay together, allows you to bring your dog, things like that. And also there's a need beyond services and affinity, and there's a need beyond keeping families together, which is self-determination, and ensuring that some of these shelters that are doing really well are, or villages or whatever the name behind them are run by the residents and are doing really well. There's a dignity in that as well. So that's another part. And finally, I'm gonna talk about a dashboard real quick that the city could create. It's a small thing that would have a big impact. Right now, if you want to help someone get into shelter, or if you want to get into shelter yourself, you have to call each shelter individually to ask, what are your rules and do you have beds available right now? We could have a dashboard that shows all the shelters, where they are on a map, how many beds are available in real time, and what the restrictions are. It's a drop in the bucket in terms of the overall spending we have, and it would save not only money for the city and for the shelters, but for all those people who are in their personal capacity or in groups helping out the houseless, are going out and making those calls over and over and over again. It's freeing up resources, the biggest resource being time, to do better work and to do more help. We have a lot of dashboards sort of internal. If you order food from a Chipotle and it's going to take a little longer than they expected. They have internal data, they can transfer it to the next closest Chipotle. So I guess my argument is if DoorDash can do it, we can too.
Oh, I love this. Thank you so much. From learning a little bit more about you, data was a big thing that they're like, oh, this is a data person.
Yeah.
This is very exciting to hear. I have so many follow-ups. I want to take a small, not a small tangent, but I think it definitely relates to affordability. There's some conversations right now around urban renewal and TIF, particularly thinking about the district that you're representing has been hit really hard by TIF and urban renewal over the past years. And I know right now there's some conversations that will come to the city council soon to have TIF in East Portland. Tell me what your stance on when it comes to tax increment financing and urban renewal as a whole.
Yeah, I think I started from a place of pretty profound skepticism around anything that could be described as urban renewal, because we've seen how it has disconnected communities across the country. In Portland, in my district, the wound left by the creation of I-5 is not just the physical cut of the freeway, but also what it's done to disconnect community, in particular in historic Albina, the Black community in Portland. And we've seen that in other parts of the city. We've seen it in other parts of the country as well. So this is not new, and it's not unique to Portland. In terms of how to address that, I think one of the biggest things we can do is we have the proposal for the largest restorative development project in the United States here in Portland, which is the LID project over I-5 that Albina Vision Trust has been pushing for, but also that a lot of community members who are not affiliated with that organization, but are just residents or former residents, have been fighting for. I was at City Council when they most recently came. The room was full. And it's amazing to see how many people are coming out to support that LID. I strongly support the LID. There is a proposal in parallel to that to double the width of I-5 below it, which the Oregon Department of Transportation is doing. I oppose that. I want to be super clear about it. I think ODOT could spend its money better. I think we should be looking at expanding transit, expanding greenways, expanding a lot of other things. I'll specifically make a plug here for building a new light rail line from St. John's to the airport along the Lombard and Columbia corridors. So that's something that we should be spending state transportation dollars on instead of doubling the width of the freeway. And this isn't just about the freeway. It's also about, we have federal funding for the LID, but when you widen the width of the freeway, the LID now has to be bigger, and it's gonna be a lot more expensive. And so one, it's the money, and two, it's how much time it takes to get the money. I'd prefer to get started on it now. I was in another interview recently where they asked if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and make something happen right now, what would it be? And I said, build the LID now, because it's gonna create union jobs, not only in Portland, but in this district. It's going to be done in a sustainable way. There's going to be green space. There's going to be the ability to have 3-story buildings built on it, and that's going to create opportunities for businesses and homes to be built in a way that both expands the rental stock in the city, but also allows for more homeownership, including for people who are historically part of that neighborhood, which the majority of which are Black Portlanders. And so I think that's the single biggest thing we could do. It's one of the 2 big infrastructure projects, the other being interstate bridge replacement, which are a part of our district and on the table right now, and making sure that we do those in a way that's sustainable and climate friendly, and also supports living wage jobs and the creation of more stock of housing, but also some business properties, so we can have things like 4 floors and corner stores. I guess it'd be 3 stores on that particular LID. But yeah, having those is the single biggest thing we can do to reverse some of the damage caused by urban renewal. In terms of TIF, I don't have a blanket on that. I know that they've revised a lot of things with it, and I'm a person who, as you said, I like to read, I like to look at the data. I'm a person who wants to look at all of that. I think that the progress they've made on it is substantial to the point where it is worth considering. I think if we were talking 20 years ago, and sort of older ways of thinking are not something that I would necessarily be able to support. But I don't know that I can give you a blanket answer on the 6 new districts they're talking about. I do know that I'm a person who likes to read it, and I will absolutely read every bill, which is a commitment I'm terrified of making because there's going to be a lot. But that's the way I like to think about things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate a few things that you mentioned. As someone who is a part of the historic, albino board for that cap, thank you for bringing that project into the space. And thank you for being willing to read all the data and the information before making a decision. For folks listening and watching, we're going to put some links to Imagine Black's analysis around TIF and urban renewal as a whole, and some historical things, but also, we're going to see what's going to happen with this upcoming vote. Framing it back to, and it was somewhat of a tangent, but I know sometimes when we talk about our housing crisis, we don't talk enough about also how the impact implications of both moving people around and as well as the impact of investing in property or investing in companies over people. Let's call it what it is. And I know for a fact the folks that we serve here at Imagine Black are still feeling the impacts of TIF and urban renewal in Northeast, and it's hard to come back. And hopefully projects like the CAP can bring some folks back home. Bringing it back to particularly about housing as it relates to houseless community, I want to talk a little bit about the part 2 to this question before I dive into more housing. But part 2 was, how could the public safety service budget, which currently is allocated towards sweeps, be better used? Let's dive into some budget questions.
So first thing, I'm excited about this because the new city council will not be in charge of bureaus in terms of the day-to-day management. We'll get to focus on policy and budgeting, but also some things like bargaining, approval of union contracts, and things like the legislative agenda development process and constituent services. I think that's the broadest range of what we expect that will happen, and there's a lot that we need to do on day one to kind of reestablish norms about who's responsible for what between the council and the mayor, and also the new leadership positions. There's going to be a council president, vice president, things like that. In terms of the budget, I've been subject to the budget. I've asked for funds and had it be changed. That's a normal process for a city employee to do, and I think we've all seen it. Budgets are moral documents, and they indicate where we're going to be devoting our time, attention, and energy, and also what we think is important. And so in terms of how we approach it, I like to think of budgets less by bureau and less by unit within a bureau and more by what the function is. So we actually spend a lot more on behavioral health, for example, than people think we do because it's in multiple places in the budget. And so there's, I think when we talk about how we're going to get people into housing, there is a budget that is focused on cleaning camps, as they will say euphemistically. It's a sweep. But there's also a budget for shelter services. And shelter services is a program that includes the safe rest villages, the temporary alternative shelter sites, and street level outreach. And it consolidated a bunch of these programs together, and as part of that consolidation, it over tripled the rate of those old programs placing people into shelter. So it was 3 or 4 people a week, now it's 1 or 2 people a day. And so when you look at that, that's working. We have the data, to go back to that point, and how do we use that data to define our priorities and decide where money's gonna go? I would love to see that scaled up and supported because we know it works. It's patient outreach. It's things like going to an encampment that has 6 different tents at it a few times and being rejected a few times until one person decides, hey, I'm gonna try that shelter out. And then when you come back, bringing that person back who can help validate the experience to the other 5 people who know that person as their neighbor and say, this is real, and I've been here this whole time and it's fine. It's ensuring that we have space to store people's things in a way that they can trust and not see them thrown away, because people who are houseless acquire items that to live on, and sometimes there's shelters that just don't have the room for anything beyond a backpack or 2. And that's not necessarily sufficient. So how do you build that trust? And I think part of it's being patient, being repetitive, and it's also way, way cheaper. So for the budget hawks out there, I'll say, take a look at how much we spend on sweeps versus on actually getting people to voluntarily come to shelter, which we know from a lot of the polling that most houseless folks want real options and will take them if provided. Yeah, I think we could probably stop there because I imagine your next question, as you hinted at, might cover the long-term plan.
Yeah, let's get into the next one. Thank you so much.